Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. It's a lovely sunny day where I am. I hope it is with you as well. So welcome, and we're going to spend about an hour or so talking about the Sava Diploma in Residential Surveying and Valuation and life as an independent surveyor. I've put a note in the chat just asking if you want to give me a bit of information about yourself. It really helps me when I'm doing this presentation, because then I know who I'm talking to and I can maybe make references. I'm going to give you my contact details at the end, so you'll be able to get in touch if you've got any questions afterwards. I'm here to talk about life as an independent surveyor. If you've got questions about the course and how it runs and so on, we've got Sam from Sava here today who can tell you about fees and timescales and that sort of thing. So that's kind of not my area. I'm here to talk about surveying and life as a surveyor. So as I say, do feel free to drop something in the chat if you'd like. And as Leo has, and welcome Leo, painter and decorator. Great, I know where to come if I need my walls painted. So let's crack on anyway. We've got about an hour. There'll be room for questions, but if you've got any questions, just drop them in the chat on the way, and I'll either pick them up on the way through or I will answer them at the end if I'm going to cover them anyway. So let's get started. I'm Alan Milstein. I'm a director of Skyline Surveyors, which is a survey writing software company. So we produce the software that allows surveyors to write their survey reports. We're going to talk about the Diploma in Residential Surveying and Valuation. So is it going to be your passport to success, or is it going to end up as a car crash? Well, hopefully we can answer your questions today. I'm sure there's lots of questions going through your mind about whether it's going to be the right thing for you, but hopefully we can cover those off. So we'll look at things like, why be a surveyor? What are the work options? Is there enough work out there? And could you survive on your own? And I think one of the important things with this course is it does give you that opportunity to work for yourself. And I'm sure that, Leo is a painter and decorator, you're probably working for yourself. Reikai, you may be working for yourself as a QS. But some of the others who have joined us today, again, you may already be working for yourself, or it may be an aspiration that you would like to do. And this course really does give you that opportunity. Little bit about myself. I trained with Sava back in 2005, so literally just 20 years ago now. And I've maintained a relationship with them ever since. I don't work for Sava. I'm not paid by Sava. Don't get paid for doing these sessions. So I've known them for about 20 years, and all I can say to you from a personal point of view is they are decent people, and they are not there just to take your money. And everything I know about Sava, they are nice people to work with. So that's all I can tell you is my personal experience, but I'm not paid by them and I'm not part of Sava or anything like that. I still have my own company, Chips Surveyors. I'm down in Chichester in West Sussex, so it's Chai Property Surveyors. I'm not active in that business now doing surveys because I'm running Skyline, the software business, but my company still exists. But I also trained to become a specialist surveyor of listed and historic and heritage buildings, so giving information about conservation. And it's one of the directions that you can go in. Once you've got a bit of time under your feet, you can start to specialize in different areas, as we're going to see. I'm a director of Skyline, but I'm also representative on a number of sort of government and industry stakeholder groups. So this is people who are involved in the home buying and selling process. So this could be anybody from the Law Society to the FCA, Financial Conduct Authority, lenders, insurers, Law Society, all these sort of, RICS, all these big organizations who are involved in some way in the home buying and selling industry. And it's a particularly interesting time for us at the moment. There's a government consultation going on at the moment about how we improve the process. Tanya, you're already on the course. Great. Okay, well, hopefully we can reinforce your positive decision for you. But yeah, so I get quite involved in the way the direction of the industry, the way things are going, what might happen in the future. Now, hopefully I can sort of bring a little bit of that in there and just sort of set the scene for you as to what you might face as time moves on. If you do this course, there's really three options open to you. You can go and work with a corporate firm, eServe, Connell, Countrywide, one of these big firms. You could go and work for a private firm, or you could be self-employed. And they all will be very different in the type of work you do. So if you work for a corporate, you're probably doing 6 or 7 valuations a day and maybe the old home buyers report or something. If you work for a private firm, then you might have a mix of work: valuations, home buyer surveys, building surveys. If you work for yourself, you'll probably do far fewer surveys, but you'll be doing them in a slightly different way and at different fee structures and so on. So there's different models, and they will work differently for different people. There's no rights and wrongs. Personally, I think the self-employment route is a great one if you are the sort of person who is suited to working for yourself. Not everybody is. Some people prefer the structure of an employer. Others are quite happy working for yourself. But I think what I would say is that this diploma, if you do want to work for yourself, it gives you a great opportunity to do that. We all have different objectives. So it might be that you're looking to give yourself a better income. Maybe you're in work. I mean, I know, Leo, you're a painter and decorator. I know that can be really hard going up and down ladders. It can be hard on the knees and all that sort of thing. So it might be you're looking for something that is going to be perhaps a little less physically demanding, which is great. So there's always going to be different needs that we all have. And it might just be that better work-life balance, or just personal development. You just want to do something different and move in a new direction. So everybody starts at a different place. And I think that all of you who are here today, you'll all be starting a different place, which means you're going to end up at a different place. Now, you're going to learn on this course, you're going to learn the same chunk of information in the middle, but because we all start and finish at a different place, that we all have a different journey through this, and we'll all end up somewhere else. So there's no black and white on this. It very much is down to your personal situation, your personal circumstances, your personal abilities and skills. And as I say, I will give you my contact details at the end. And if you do want to have a chat about what it might mean for you or something like that, then just do get in touch, because always very happy to. I work with a lot of people who are either thinking of or doing the course and looking at what their future might be. So I'm well used to talking to people about it. Now, self-employment, it's always a balance, isn't it? There's pros and cons. And as I say, not everybody fits one model. We're all slightly different. So the pros, well, it can be flexible working, in as much as if you don't want to work on Thursdays because that's the day you take the dogs for a dog group exercise or something, fine, you can choose to do that if you're working for yourself. The downside, of course, is there's a certain inflexibility to it, because no one else is going to do the work. The work sits there and it doesn't get done unless you do it. And if you take a holiday, not only do you lose the income that you would have gained by doing work while you're on holiday, but then you've got to catch up afterwards. So there's pros and cons. There's a freedom to choose if you're working for yourself. So what I did was to do a lot of extra training, but it meant I specialized in conservation and heritage buildings, partly because in my area down in West Sussex, we've got lots of flint and lime buildings, and they tend to be higher value properties. And so I figured, well, I could charge more for surveys, and I became the specialist locally for doing those types of properties. There is the opportunity for a higher income, either just as an individual, one-man band. And again, this is a great occupation for those who just want to be a one-man band, which is all I wanted to be from the surveying point of view. But of course, you can grow your business and employ people, etc. There's self-development opportunities, like I did, for example, but there's lots of different directions, and we'll cover that as well. And just being your own boss, being able to make your own decisions. But some people don't want to have to make their own decisions. Some people would rather have somebody else make the important decisions and they carry them out. So obviously, the downsides of working for yourself is that inflexibility. And as much as, well, you've got to do the work, it's got to be done. Somebody else, there's nobody else going to do it. There's a commitment, because it's only you that's going to do the survey. And if you're sick, well, no one else is going to do it, and your client is still buying that house and they still need that survey done. So you've got to go and do it. And it might be that you don't feel like doing it, but you've got a commitment to do it. An unreliable income, of course, it's not there. Having said that, I think that most surveyors fairly quickly, who go and work for themselves, fairly quickly find that actually they establish a fairly good level of steady income quite quickly. There's always a lack of time. When you're working for yourself, you never get everything done that you want to do, because there's the accounts to do, and there's the surveys to do, and the writing up to do, and the HMRC stuff, and all the other bits and pieces that all need doing, and insurance to deal with, and everything else. So there's always a lack of time, isn't there? And you've got to run your own office, and it may be that you employ somebody to assist you, or you just do it yourself, and it's perfectly possible to do it for yourself. But there is that responsibility of doing it. So there's pros and cons. And as individuals, it's important to sort of think, okay, how's it going to work for me? The important thing, though, is that if you want to do it, this course gives you that opportunity. And this is all about opportunity, as we say. So if we look at the market, though, and the environment in which we as residential surveyors work, what is that opportunity? Well, firstly, there is huge opportunity for growth potential. Now, it may surprise you to learn that only somewhere between 10 and 30% of people buying a house actually gets a survey. Now, bear in mind that pretty much all the surveyors around are fairly busy, and yet we're only capitalizing on under a third of the market. Now, there's arguments about those figures, because there are no reliable figures, but it is somewhere in that region, which means, of course, there's a massive potential, because 70, 80% of people buying homes are not getting a survey. There is quite a lot of talk now about how we change that around and perhaps move surveys from buyer's responsibility to seller's responsibility. We'll come on to that, and that's another big discussion. There's new sectors which are being developed. So, for example, I've always long felt that the insurance industry are really missing a trick. So if I'm an insurance company insuring people's homes, would it not be in my interests to make sure that people are maintaining their homes properly? And in order to get them maintaining their homes properly, we need to tell them what they need to look at, what they need to be repairing, and what they need to be doing. So there's just one opportunity for surveyors to be able to interact with people in a different environment. There's lots of new product and tech coming onto the market, and we will touch on that tech side of things a bit. If you walk into a room of surveyors, generally you are walking into a room of 50-plus-year-old white males. And so the age profile, it's the same with all professions, whether you look at accountants or solicitors, generally you'll find that they are an old age band, and that just means that there's plenty of opportunity for more diversity and more people to come into the industry. The other thing is that there are very limited entry pathways into residential surveying. Effectively, there's only two routes. That is, go and get a building surveying degree and find a training contract, or do this course with Sava. There's nobody else does this course, so it's not like there's 10 different companies offering it. It's only Sava, and there is only one course of its type. It is quite a unique industry in as much as there are so few pathways to come into it. And that does mean that it's not overrun with people. So, this is not, I will say to you, this is an easy course, but it's a hard course. In as much as technically, homes are actually quite simple, but there's a lot of things to learn. And so across the course of the 2 years you're going to be doing the course, there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to understand. But it's not technically that difficult. We are not building rocket ships and sending them to Mars. So because it's quite challenging, of course, not so many people actually, get through to the end of it and become qualified. You've got to be dedicated to it, which is great because it means our industry is not overrun with people. And that means that fees stay at reasonably good levels and that, we can earn a decent living doing it. So I think there is plenty of opportunity within the environment in which we work in, and hopefully that gives you lots of opportunity. And of course, as I said, you are all individuals and all different, and you'll have different interests, and you'll want to maybe focus on different parts of the business, which is fine. And of course, because of your doing that, again, it's giving more opportunity across a wider spectrum. So we're going to answer, hopefully, some of the questions that are going through your mind. As I said, there's plenty of opportunity. Do drop questions into the chat. any time you like, and I'll cover them either as we go through or at the end. But I'm going to try and cover some of these questions that might be in your mind right now, thinking about doing the course, or, for Tanya, you're doing the course already. Okay, let's just try and clear up some of the myths that might be in your mind. So firstly, can I be an independent surveyor with the Diploma in Residential Surveying? 100% yes, you can. You do not need to work for somebody else before setting up on your own. The day you finish this course, you can set up on your own as an independent surveyor. As I said, some of you will be more than confident and competent to do that. Others, less so, because we are all different. Some will want to go and work for another company first. That's fine, but you don't need to. And I think that's the important thing to understand, is that if it's your choice that you want to set up first, nothing stops you. Now, the course will give you direct entry to the RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, at associate level. You do not have to be a member of RICS to be a surveyor. I am not a member of RICS, never have been, but I am a surveyor. I'm not a chartered surveyor, I'm a surveyor. So you don't have to be a chartered surveyor, you can be a surveyor, and this course will give you that capability. So just be clear, you don't have to be anything. Tanya, I'm going to cover that in one of the later slides. So yeah, we'll cover that question. But if I don't cover it thoroughly enough, then do ask me. So yes, be absolutely sure that you can be a surveyor with this qualification. So what does a typical day look like? There's a lot of misunderstanding. I think if you ask the average man in the street or person in the street, what a surveyor does, they'll say that he turns up with an iPad, spends 15 minutes walking around your house and leaves. Now, that's not a surveyor, that's a valuer. There is a different job. There's valuer and surveyor. They are two different things. Now, you learn to be both on this course. It's the Diploma in Residential Surveying and Valuation. So you learn to be both, but they are different jobs. Unfortunately, the general public confuses the two, and they don't really understand the difference. Partly that's because of the industry does itself no favors by referring it to a valuation survey. So they are very different things. But what we're talking here is a survey. We're also talking about a survey carried out by an independent surveyor, somebody like myself who works for myself. That is very different to a surveyor working for a corporate, Connells, eServe, countrywide. It's a totally different job. And yes, we're still producing a report on the condition of the property, but how we go about it is very, very different. And that's not a bad thing. It's exactly the same way. I always think about supermarkets. We can go to Aldi and Lidl, who have this sort of, the value for money proposition, and that's what they offer. But then you go to Waitrose and Marks and Spencer's, and they have a quality and service proposition. They're both selling groceries, so they're both doing the same job, but they come at it from two different angles. And that's the thing. There are many different forms of doing the same job. I'm talking about being an independent surveyor. So what my day might look like as an independent surveyor is I'll do desktop research about the property, which might take me about 30 minutes. I will then go on site, and when I say inspection, 3 to 4 hours, my typical inspection is a 3-bedroom 1950s semi. So we all know what they're like. They have a bay on the front, typical property. They're good sized rooms. It's 1950s. It's getting a bit old now. It's what, 78, 75 years old. So it's going to have a few defects, biggish garden, fairly typical. We see them everywhere. And that's going to take me, typically a property like that, I'd be on site 3¼ hours, but it's give or take. It's going to take me 2 to 3 hours to write up the survey, and then I'm going to do other quotes and admin. That's a day. Now, actually, what you find as an independent surveyor is you can't do that 5 days a week. Or it's a struggle. You can, but it's a struggle because you need a bit of slack time. Sometimes things change and you need a bit of slack time. So 3 or 4 surveys a week. That is what a typical independent surveyor would be doing. And we'll come on to fees and how that works in a minute. Now, the next question, and I think on everybody's mind, is AI going to replace the surveyor? Are there going to be robots flying around a house doing a survey? Are there going to be apps that a consumer can use to walk around their house, etc.? Well, to some extent, but when I walk into a room, the first thing I do is smell. I don't look even, I smell, So I don't smell, I smell the room. And that tells me an awful lot about that property. And then I touch things and I'm feeling and I'm getting a sense of, when I go into a room, particularly in an older property, and I walk across the room, I can almost certainly tell you if that floor is sloping. Not because I can see it, I feel it. And it might only be a little bit, but you just feel it and you sense things. So whilst I think that AI will be a valuable tool in our armory, we're already using it to help us improve the writing of our surveys. I don't think that AI will be replacing a physical inspection for many years to come, because I don't think that you can. I think, getting to that point where the nuances of aroma, for example, what's damp and what's a candle, how do those things differ? I think we're a long, long way before a robot of some sort can replace that. So I do think that we've got a good opportunity for a long, active career as surveyors. What are the setup costs? Well, actually, to set up as an independent surveyor can be relatively inexpensive. It's not like £100,000 worth of technical equipment that you need. You need a camera, or more likely, you're going to use your phone, which you've got anyway. A moisture meter, which is between £100 and £300. A set of ladders, £100. A laser measure for measuring distances and size, room size and things, £100 to £300 again. A camera pole, so a tall pole, or a drone. Yes, I mean, they can be up to £1,000, but just on drones is an interesting one, because whilst it seems obvious that you can use a drone to look at the roof and the bits that you can't see from the ground, the problem is, if you're like me, you're in Chichester, I can't use a drone in Chichester because then we've got Goodwood airfield there, which means it's restricted airspace. Or if you're near Heathrow or Leeds Bradford Airport or whatever, it's restricted, or to other areas. Or if it's blowing a gale out there and you can't put your drone up. And the problem is that if we've got a job to do and we can't sort of say, oh, well, it was a windy day, so I couldn't use the drone, so I couldn't tell you about the roof. Well, no, that's not good enough. So we've got to find other means. So we might have a camera pole. I've got an 8 or 10 meter pole with a camera on top, so you can see the tops of the roofs and so on, and the tops of chimneys, because that's our backup. So we do these things. So that's why. And that might be, a camera pole might be, again, £100 to £300, and drone can be whatever. Well, actually, if you want one of the sub 250 gram drones, probably 500 quid or less. Screwdrivers, crowbars, torches. Why do you need crowbars? Lifting up drain covers. They all have inspection chambers. They all have different ways of lifting them, and actually a screwdriver and a crowbar is the best way usually. Your phone, tablet, whatever. Again, we can use our phone for photographs, for notes, etc. And then a computer with a number of screens. Now, I actually have 4 screens attached. I've got a Mac Mini, but again, Windows computers, etc. But I have 4 screens, and actually that's, you need multiple screens, really, really useful, and means of data storage. So, but it's not sort of highly technical, highly expensive equipment. What happens if I get stuck? As I said, there's this huge amount to learn. It's not technically difficult, but there's a lot of stuff to learn. But we can't know everything, and we don't know everything, and no surveyor knows everything. But what you do learn is what you don't know. And so you look at something and say, well, I've never seen that before. Well, that's fine, not a problem. But we do know how to record things, and that's really, really important. So we will take photographs, measurements, moisture meter readings, whatever it might be, around that feature that we don't understand fully, and then we can come back, and then we can use ChatGPT. We can put things on Facebook. There's lots of groups that you can participate in. There's student groups. People call and they'll email me with questions. I don't know everything, but I've seen a lot of stuff. So sometimes I can help people, or at least point them in the right direction. One of the advantages, though, is that we as surveyors don't need to give an instant judgment on something when we're at the property. because we have the opportunity to go back to our office, do our research, and then give an opinion based on what we've learned. So it does mean that it's not often that you come across something that you are completely unaware of. You will have an idea of what it is you're looking at, but if you put it on Facebook on one of the Surveyors Hub or something, I guarantee you will find the industry expert on that feature, whatever it is. There's always an expert on everything. So yeah, so we do have stuff we don't know, but we know how to. And I think one of the important things about being a surveyor is that it's a very sort of methodical, process-driven job. We go in, we will always walk around the house. I will always start, for example, I will start my inspection at the far left back corner of the garden. And why do I start there? Well, A, because I've got to start somewhere, and B, because I know if I do my site plan, I draw a site plan, and I know that if I start there, in my mind, I can fit that on the page. And I'm not going to run out of space when I get to the front. So I can look at the proportions of the front and back gardens and the property. So I start there, and then I work my way around that property, and I'll go and do all the boundary fences, and I'll do all the paving and the paths and the outbuildings, and then I'll come on to the main building. But all the while I'm going around, I've been there around that house, 3 or 4 times. I'll have gone round the whole property and the whole site because I'm learning as I'm going around. And then I come onto the property itself, and I'll look at the front of the property, and I'll do all that. And then I'll go to the side and the back, and then I go upstairs, and I go into the loft, and then I work my way around the rooms in a top down, and so it's a process, and we learn how to do that, and we learn what we record on the way. And so when we come to something that we don't know, okay, don't know what that is, but I can fit it into my process here. How much can I charge? Well, again, it's going to vary significantly depending on where you are, how you've pitched your business. I've always pitched my business as being at the top end, the premium end. And I always want to be a bit different to everybody else in the market, because if I'm different and as I present myself in a different way to other people, then they can't compare me. So I talk about my surveys in a very different way to the way that other surveyors will talk about their surveys, because I want people to buy me. And once they've decided they want to buy me, then the price ceases to become the main discussion point. So it does depend how you present your business and yourself. But typically for that 1950s 3-bed semi, we're somewhere in the region of £500 to £1,000. I would probably be starting. It depends a little bit. Again, if the market's really busy, you're going to be a bit higher. If it's a bit quieter, you'll be a little bit lower. But I'd be around £700-800, that kind of area. Now, think what I was saying earlier on. As an independent surveyor, I'm doing 3 or 4 surveys a week. Start making the sums, and you can start to see the sort of income level that is available. So that's not an untypical fee. Now we'll come on to VAT in a minute, because that's again a relevant point. So will I get paid? And that's always a question. Are you going to have bad debts or anything? Now, different surveyors will approach this in different ways. There is no right, there is no wrong. I've always said I want payment in advance, and what I say to my clients is, you pay me up front. That way I haven't got to waste my time chasing people for money. I can spend more time looking at your property. But if you have to cancel for any reason whatsoever, right up until the moment I leave home to go and do your inspection, then I will just give you an instant refund. I won't make no questions, no deductions, nothing. I'll just give you back your money without fail. And people go, oh, okay, great. And actually, I did have one. I was literally putting my tool bag in the back of the car when they phoned and said the deal's off. Can you cancel the survey? Yeah, okay, it happens. But what happens, of course, is if you treat people fairly like that, then A, they'll say to other people who they come across somebody buying home, oh, Alan, he's really good, he's really fair, didn't make any argument, even when he was just about to leave home. You'll get a good reputation, and that's what builds your business. Other surveyors will ask for payment when they've booked the inspection. Others, once they've completed the inspection but not sent the report. Others will complete the report but not send it until they've had the money. Others will send the report and then ask for the money. Of course, the value of the report is the information in it. Once you've given people the information, you can't take it back again. They've got the information, haven't they? So I've just always felt better to deal with it up front. But again, different people do it in different ways, and it works for them and doesn't work for others. Rachel from accounts is obviously going to get involved in VAT. As an independent surveyor, don't forget, most of my customers, almost exclusively, my customers are going to be private individuals, not businesses. So they cannot reclaim VAT. So if I have to add VAT to my fee, then as far as the customer is concerned, that is the net fee. So if my fee was £600, then they're going to be paying £750, aren't they? £720. Sorry, they're going to be paying £720, and that's the fee that will be in their mind, and they'll be comparing £720 with £720 elsewhere. So by avoiding VAT, then obviously you retain more of that income for yourself. So I can charge £700 and get all of that rather than having to lose the 20% of the VAT. For the year 25-26, the VAT threshold is 90,000. And actually, if you start then doing those sums, so 4 to 5 surveys a week at about £700, so that's what, £2,500 to £3,000 a week, right? And you might work 45 weeks a year. So you can see, actually, you could start bumping up to that VAT threshold pretty darn quickly. And I know plenty of surveyors who come to, this time of year are thinking, well, actually, January, February, I'm not really going to do anything because I'm up to my VAT threshold and the end of the financial year is March. So that's the sort of sums that we can do. And that's not an unusual set of circumstances. There are risks, as with any business, any activity, any skill, whatever. There's always going to be some risks. First one, I think, with our job is the physical risks, and you do need to be mindful of this. And doing a risk assessment is really important. Now, you might do that mentally, you might do it on paper, but when you walk into a property, what am I facing? So firstly, are there unaccompanied minors, for example? So, no, not going in there. Are there animals? Well, that's fine. I've had rabbits running loose around the house, budgies. Don't let the budgie out. All that sort of stuff. Don't let the cat out. All those sorts of things. They're risks that we've got to take account of. But then there's the physical risks. So if I'm going to be using the loft ladder that's installed, is it safe to use? Is there safe access to the loft? Because I need to go up into the roof space. But how am I going to get up there safely? And of course, it does require a degree of physical ability. We mentioned earlier with Leo there, who's a painter decorator, and as many paint or trades find that get to a point in life where actually they're up and down, and the knees and all the rest of it start to take a bit of a toll. But we still got to get up into the loft now, because we're not doing it as frequently as you might be if you're a painter decorator. It's less toll on the body, but you still got to be able to do it. Are we physically able to actually get into tight spaces and move around safely and so on? So you've got to think about that. I'm not saying that if you've got a physical disability, it doesn't mean say you can't do the job, but it might be that you have to think, actually, I go with somebody else and they will do the inspection up in the loft because I'm not able to get in the loft myself, but they can get up there and do that inspection and we can discuss it afterwards. So people do that. And I mean, husbands, wives, partners, wives, husbands, all the other permutations, wherever they might be, without offending anybody, they might, or business partners will set up, a system whereby one might do the outside, one does the inside, one does the inspection, one does the writing up, one does the words, one does the photos. There's as many different ways of doing this as there are people. So yeah, we can all do it. Negligence, and it's one of the things that I think that it's the one thing that I would criticize Sava for, is I think they go a bit overboard on telling you about and warning about the risks of negligence and you're going to get sued and this sort of thing, because they are not as great as if we do the job properly, thoroughly and diligently every single time, the risks of getting it wrong are actually pretty small. You will not miss the big crack in the wall. You're just not going to miss it. Do surveyors miss stuff? Yes, we all do. But actually, most cases, if you miss something, it's because you couldn't see it. And the important bit then is recording your limitations. So if there's a great big wardrobe in front of the damp patch, well, yes, when the new buyer moves in, on the day they move in, they'll see the big damp patch because the wardrobe's not there anymore. But when we were there, the wardrobe was there. And not only did we note that in our report, but we recorded it, we've got photographs and everything. So we do the job properly and diligently and thoroughly, and you reduce the risk of getting something wrong. However, just in driving your car, you don't go and drive your car like a lunatic every day. You drive it carefully, thoroughly, diligently. But when something does go wrong, you have insurance. No different to surveyors. If we make a mistake, something goes wrong, we have insurance. That's what it's there for. So it's not something to worry about. It's something to be mindful of, and something to make sure that you do everything possible in your day-to-day task to reduce the risks of getting something wrong. But if during the course you feel that the risks of getting a claim against you are putting you off, then come and talk to me and I'll tell you about the reality, because it's not that bad, really. Financial security, if you're working for yourself, of course, then, there's the unexpected, isn't there? We all know what they are. Interestingly, that the housing market, although it does ebb and flow a certain amount, when you look at the numbers across the board, the number of transactions goes approximately from the bottom to the top of the market, from 800,000 to 1.2 million. So there's a bit of a gap, but it's not massive. It's not like, 10,000 to 10 million. It's not like that. It's a much more stable market than perhaps many of us think. So from a surveyor's point of view, there's a fairly steady stream. And actually, when I think back over the last 10 years, I don't recall a time when, say, surveyors were going, oh my God, it's terrible, there's just nothing around. Of course, we all spent a few months doing nothing during the pandemic, but that was a relatively short-lived period. And in fact, one of the interesting things is that I was working during the pandemic, working with government and alongside RICS to make sure that surveyors were one of the first groups of professionals allowed back into people's homes after the lockdown. And actually, I think it was May the 26th or something that we were able to get back into people's homes. And surveyors were one of the first groups that were able to do that, because the government recognised how important it was to keep the housing market going. If you do this course, what type of work could you do? Well, all these sorts of surveys are available to you to do. But again, I will stress we all have a different level of competence and confidence, because we're all starting at different places. So it's understandable, it's natural. But you can do building surveys, home buyer surveys, pre-marketing surveys, which are going to become more relevant in our market, snagging reports, defect reports, and valuations. As a minimum, that's what you can do. Some of you will be less confident at doing certain parts of those. Some will be more so. But there's no reason why you can't do any of those when you don't. So the full range of home surveys of one sort or another. We are getting to your question, Tanya. I think it's a slide coming up, so we will answer your question. What's included in the survey? And again, I think there's a lot of misunderstanding probably about what goes into a survey. And there's a list there of all the different things that we would look at. So we'll be looking at planning information, local knowledge and information, environmental information, flood risk, radon risk, all sorts of other things. Health and safety advice, energy efficiency becoming, of course, more and more important. Climate change, the effects of climate change. So, for example, if we've got large windows on the south-facing elevation of the property, we're going to have more heat gain. If we've got an older roof, maybe with quite slender rafters, which are already under stress because somebody changed the roof from slate to heavier tiles, cement tiles. And then what happens when you get a big heavy snow load on there? We're going to get heavier snow events, aren't we? All these things we've got to think about. Then we're looking at conveyancer support. What do the boundaries look like? Do they look like the plan? Is there something that the conveyancer needs to think about? And then we're coming on to the sort of building pathology. So looking around that building, understanding how that building is working. 95% of all the issues around buildings are to do with moisture in one form or another. So we've got to understand, how is moisture moving around that building? What's happening to the rainfall? What's happening to moisture that's coming onto the walls? What's happening to condensation in the property? Understanding how all these things work is all part of our building pathology. And then defect analysis. When we do find something wrong, what's the cause of that? We're not saying, oh, get somebody else in to have a look. No, our job is to explore, follow the trail of suspicion, as they say. Now, sometimes we come up against a barrier, we can't go any further because we just simply, without opening up the property, we can't see what's going on. We can assume, but we can't see it. And so at some point we might be saying, get somebody else in to open up. But as far as possible, we'll be giving a repair advice and maintenance advice of that property. So really trying to give people a really thorough, complete picture of what's going on in that property. And now we get to, where do I get work from? So actually, you know what, it's if you go in with the right attitude to any of these sorts of people, and particularly estate agents, at the moment, and things may change on that, but at the moment, it's probably estate agents who are the primary source of referrals for surveyors. And it depends how you approach them. And I've always taken an approach very different to everybody else. Because what I would do is I would go into an estate agent and say, I want to help you sell houses. And they go, what? Because they're, in their view, surveyors stop them selling houses because surveyors say how bad a house is. No, I'm going to say how good 90% of that property is. And if there is something that's wrong with that property, that 10%, I'll describe it in rational language. I'll explain how it can be resolved and everybody can get on. Because if you're working for a buyer, your customer wants to buy that house. That's their dream. They want to buy that house. Your job is to help them buy that house, but help them buy that house with full knowledge of what they are buying into. Now, that might affect the price they want to pay. They might say, well, no, that's too much work for me. Fair enough. But if we can, we want to help them buy the house. And I think that if we go to an estate agent and say, look, that's my job, is to help people buy houses. I'm on your side. We are working together on this and trying to get somebody into a house. You've got a client who wants to sell the house. I've got a client who wants to buy the house. We want to keep them together because that's good for both of them. But let's do it to make sure everybody knows what's happening. So it's how we approach this. Conveyancers, most conveyancers never see a surveyor come through their doors saying, how can I help you? How can I do more to make your job easier? So it's all about how we approach this, really, rather than just walking in saying, I'm a surveyor, give me work. Client referrals, as I say, if you've done a great job, if you've treated your customer really well, then I'll answer your question in a minute, Leo. If you treat your customers really well, you will get referrals, you will get people passing you on. Theo says, do you need to be chartered? You do not need to be chartered to be a surveyor. I'm not chartered. I'm a surveyor. I'm not a member of RICS. And a chartered surveyor is a member or a fellow of RICS, so MRICS or FRICS. They are the only chartered surveyors. I'm not a chartered surveyor. I'm a surveyor. I get plenty of work, I did, from estate agents because I do a bloody good job. End of, So it's not about your badges. It's about what you do as a service. And I don't get discriminated against. Panels, there's various panels and referral sites where you can get work. That tends to be at lower fees because it's just more generic work there. So yeah, you can get work there. A good website, and just a tip, don't sell surveys on your website. Somebody's come to your website, they're already wanting a survey, aren't they? So we want to sell ourselves. They always say that the most important thing you can ever sell is yourself. And on your website, make sure there's a nice cuddly picture of you. Tell them what you are as a person, what your values are, what's important to you, and that builds that relationship with the client. And of course, sellers. So we've talked about being in a house for 3-4 hours. When the seller sees you being that thorough on the property that they're selling, then they think, well, I don't necessarily want them being that thorough on this house, but I do want them being that thorough on the house I'm about to buy. So it's getting building that relationship, and you can build the relationship with the seller there while you're there. Can I do commercial work? And the answer is no, not with this qualification. If you're interested in doing commercial stuff, this is not the qualification for you. There is no crossover. There is a very small crossover in terms of the type of construction of some commercial properties. However, if you are doing this course in your residential, your insurance will probably prohibit you doing commercial stuff anyway. There is a grey area, of course, where there's properties where they live and it's a shop with a accommodation above and they live there, and so grey area there. But in general, no, it's not commercial at all. Can I get professional indemnity insurance? The answer is absolutely. On the day you complete this course, you can get professional indemnity insurance policy, which is fully compliant with industry standards, and it will cost you generally somewhere between £500 and £1,000. That's assuming you're not doing valuation for secured lending. Now, the course does include valuation, and if you go and work for Countrywide or somebody like that, you will be doing valuation for secured lending. So the course does teach you how to do that function. But most independent surveyors would not do valuation for secured lending. They do very little valuation. I don't do any valuation. But it doesn't mean to say it's not worth knowing about valuation, because even though I'm not putting a value on the property, it's really important that I advise my client of factors that might affect the value or the future value. So if I think one example, lovely listed property out in the countryside, what the client hadn't realised was there was a planning application for a waste recycling plant or incinerator plant about 500 yards behind the property. So yes, that would have affected the value. So obviously that was important to explain to the client how that might influence the value, although I'm not actually giving them a value. So valuation is important, although we may not specifically do it. But so if you're excluding valuation for secured lending, then yeah, somewhere in that region. So it's not prohibitive by any means. What direction is the industry moving in? Well, I think there is currently a government consultation going on about changes to the home buying and selling process. And within that, it does talk about condition reports. I am very much directly involved in that discussion that's going on at the moment. And in general terms, what the industry is trying to do is use more digital information. Still, an awful lot of the process of buying and selling a house is manual bits of paper or PDFs, and it's unreliable information. So it has to be constantly verified and re-verified. So what government is trying to do is join all that together, make it digital information from a verifiable source that everybody can tap into the same piece of information, which makes absolute sense. The problem comes, and of course, with digital stuff, it can fly around instantly. It's not a problem. What comes to the different bit is condition, because condition you can only judge by physically going to the property. That's the only bit where you physically need to go to the property, and you need to do a physical inspection. So the government is looking at different ways that could be dealt with, and there's lots of considerations. So, for example, in Scotland, they have a basic survey on every property. It's mandatory that a seller has to commission a basic thing called a single survey, basic survey that the buyer can rely on. The problem with that is that it's a very basic survey. It doesn't give much advice to the client, to the buyer, about how to look after that property. It's also a standard product, which is supposed to fit across every different type of property. So it's unsuitable, really, for most properties. It's suitable for that little tranche in the middle, but it has to extend across. And so it's not a great solution at all. And so the Scottish, those that say, oh, we need what they do in Scotland. No, we do not need that. That's entirely the wrong model. In Norway and Denmark, they do things differently. Denmark's interesting because what they do is they say to the seller, you are responsible for all the defects that you have not identified to the seller for 10 years after you've sold that property. What that means is that in Denmark, all the sellers go and get a really thorough survey done on their property, because that highlights all the issues, which are then given to the buyer or potential buyer, but they also then get a hidden defects insurance policy shared. The cost is shared between seller and buyer to cover things that couldn't have been spotted in the survey. So there's lots of different ways. The government doing consultation at the moment. I think what we're going to firstly is it is highly unlikely that anything significant would change during this Parliament. And as things stand, I think there's a very good chance we'll have a different government after the end of this government. So, I don't know the answer. I don't have a crystal ball. However, it is highly unlikely that anything would change significantly in this Parliament, which takes us up to, 2029. And in terms of condition surveying, I think that we need a lot of research done first to really understand how this is going to influence people. So I think that for somebody coming into the industry, really, it's not something we should worry about. It will be what it will be, and we'll deal with it at the time. But it's going to be quite a few years, and let's see how we deal with it. So I wouldn't worry about it. I would say the industry at the moment is going ahead in the way that we do things traditionally. So traditionally, buyers commission surveys. We, as Skyline, have created a product for a seller to commission a survey, which the buyer can rely on. And that's, I think we're going to start to see more people thinking along those lines, and we'll start to see more activity. But that's all great, because it just means we're going to increase the size of the industry. How do you stay up to date with industry changes? Really good question, Tanya. Yeah, there's lots of online publications. There's Estate Agent Today, The Negotiator, there's LinkedIn, there's Facebook, there's a million places to go. And what I would say is, as you're going through this journey, is learn about what else goes on in our industry, not just surveying. I know time is not always on your side, but try to. Thinking conscious of time, what could you do once you've got this qualification? And you maybe do a bit of surveying for a few years, and then think about, well, where do I want to go? How do I want to develop myself? And there's lots of different ways you can do what I did and go to the the conservation end of things. But there's new build snagging, there's sellers owners surveys, party wall work, stock condition. There's a whole range of different ways that you can develop yourself and your career once you've got the basics of this qualification in place. So by no means does it lock you into one very narrow sector. You've got great opportunities to extend. And I think you will find different things that interest you as an individual. What's the bad things about the job? Well, bad weather is probably the worst. We get a few negative estate agents. Some houses are pretty grubby. But really, there's not a lot of downsides. I mean, that picture was taken, I can remember that actually. It was February 2020 on the Burdham Strait. And if you know where I am in Chichester, going down to West Wittering Beach, Burdham Strait, it was a house on the right side, actually built by Phillips Builders, and it was I think owned still by a part of the family. Anyway, I was doing a survey on this house, and it was a miserable day. It was cold, it was wet, it was windy, and I was outside for like an hour and a half and doing the inspection. And then I went inside and thawed out, and the owner made me a cup of tea and so on. So it wasn't so bad. But really, there's not a lot of bad sides about this job. There really isn't. But there's a lot of good sides, and I think the good sides are things like variety. Even if you go onto a housing estate of identical looking houses, when you walk into each one, everyone will be different. They'll be lived in different ways. They'll be changed in different ways. And there will be different things to find, and you never know what you're going to find. Then you have knowledge. And as I said to you, this course, there's a lot to learn. But that's great, because when you absorb all that knowledge, then you know what you're looking at, because you've got it all there underpinning. So it is a lot of knowledge. And one thing I will say to you is, if you do this course, do not think you can pick it up for a week and then put it down for 3 weeks and then pick it up again. You need to work on this every single day. And if you do a bit every day, I can remember the day I started the course, which was November the 12th, 2005. And we were doing it, then it was, of course, mostly physical rather than, it wasn't online. The course director was the College of Estate Management in Reading, and the course director was a chap called Ben Elder. Ben is now, I think, the Global Valuation Director for RICS. But Ben was the course director, and he said, look, there's a huge amount here. It's big. He said, but how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is in little bits. And that's the thing with this. If you do this course, the best piece of advice I can possibly give you is to do a bit every day. And if you do a bit every day, you'll get through it without a problem, because there is just a lot to learn. But with that knowledge comes the responsibility, and you can take on that responsibility. So people are going to rely on you for committing £500,000 of their money based on what you tell them. That's a big responsibility, but actually it doesn't weigh heavily because we know what we know. We've learned all this stuff. So we can give them good advice. And as a result of that, you get respect. I spent 20 plus years prior to becoming a surveyor as a sales and marketing director up to international director level, not related to this industry in any way, shape or form. I never had, I felt any respect for what I did. But the moment I became a surveyor, I felt respected. And I think people do trust you. And most important thing is we get to make people's dreams come true, because it may be the house that they're going to have their first home. It may be where they're going to have their family, where they're going to grow up together, where they're going to end their days. All these landmark moments in people's lives, we have the opportunity to help them realize those dreams. And I think there's few jobs which can actually have more satisfaction than that. I'll come to your question in a minute, Leo. So just really very, very briefly to sum up, low setup costs, other than the cost of the course, of course, which are, but if you think about the cost of the course, what is it, 16 grand or something? How many surveys have you got to do at 700 quid a time to pay for that? Actually, it's about 2 months' work. So it's not a lot in those terms, is it, if you think about that? We do expect a growth in demand in whichever way it comes, a growth in demand for the need for surveys. There is a high barrier to entry. It's not an easy course, this, not difficult technically, but there's a lot to do. You've got to be diligent. The skills are very valued. Overheads are relatively low. Lots of opportunities for career and personal development and for flexibility. Can you subcontract areas like inspecting the roof? I think subcontract is the wrong word, Leo. I think you could partner up, buddy up. There's lots of ways that you could work with somebody. It's the trust and element and so on. You've got to do it in a way that's going to work for everybody. But yeah, there's different ways that you could do it. But you are the surveyor. It's your signature in the back of the report. How happy and confident are you that the information you're putting in that report is the right information for your client? That's the important thing. So now we've got just a couple of minutes left. I don't know if there's any questions. There's my contact details on the screen. Do make a note. Connect on LinkedIn, Alan Milstein, you'll find me, or also on Surveyors Hub, things like that. If you do go down this route, do keep in touch. If you've got any questions, if you've got any thoughts, then yeah, you know where I am, and I'm very, very happy to help. And it can be a great career, great opportunity. I won't underestimate the amount of work to get through the course, but if you can dedicate a couple of years consistently to doing this course, I don't think you will regret it at all. It will have been a good investment, and I think that all the people I talk to who have done it, are generally very, very happy that they've done it. And yeah, I think Sava are there to help you get through it. They want you to succeed. We all want you to succeed. Thanks, Tanya. Well, good luck, Tanya, because you're starting in March, did you say? Yeah, so brilliant. If Sava do their Careers Day or the Sava, the Residential Expo in October. So yeah, if you come into the one next October, they're normally in Coventry, then do come and say hello. I'll be on the Skyline stand. Come and say hello. Tell me how you're getting on. If you need a bit of a pep talk some way through, then always get in touch. Thanks, Chris. Medical photographer. Oh, well, there you go. So, funny enough, I spoke to, somebody I spoke to yesterday had just finished the course and they were a cameraman. So, I don't know whether that's any relevance there, but they come from being a cameraman. And what's interesting actually is the number of people who come from careers and you think, oh, that must be a really exciting career, and they want to become a surveyor. So because they see this as a much more interesting, exciting career. So yeah, it's interesting how people see it. But yeah, at least you'll take good photos, Chris. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, do keep in touch. And good luck. Make a good decision if you're thinking about doing the course. Enjoy the experience if you are doing the course. And just in those down moments when you're thinking, oh, this is all going, it's all too much, just remember, just plow through it and you'll get to the end and you'll come out the other side and you'll be very glad you did. Thank you. Oh, Aaron, what did you say? I mentioned, oops, just looking at the chat. Oh, Aaron, you said you mentioned, and it says nothing else. So I don't know if you meant to put something else there. Leo, I think it is recorded. I think Sava will send you a recording. And just before we finish, Aaron, just let Aaron type in whatever you're typing. And if I can answer it quickly, because we are up on our time. Oh, your follow-up. Okay. Yeah, good. Okay, there you go. We've got the details, Alan at Skyline Surveyors Ltd. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine while we've got it. And I will look forward to meeting some of you in due course as you progress through your career as a surveyor. And I hope this is the first day of the rest of your life. All the best. Thank you very much.